started because we do have a full agenda this morning. The first, I would like to acknowledge he had to step out for a little bit, maybe go to another meeting, but due to a phone malfunction our last meeting, Sean Miller has provided us with donuts over on the side, so thanks, Sean, when you happen to see him. The next item on the agenda is, are there any requests for bill introductions? All right, not seeing any. We'll go ahead and move on to the first major item on the agenda, and that is going to be, I'm going to open the hearing on Senate Bill 155, which is a substitute for Senate Bill 155 by the Committee on Ways and Means, making and concerning appropriations for fiscal years 2023, 2024, 2025, and 2026 for various state agencies. We'll have a bill brief by Dylan Deere, the Assistant Director for Fiscal Affairs with the Kansas Legislative Research Department. Dylan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. So you should have a 7-page document before you, which is our overview of the bill explanation for the sub for Senate Bill number 155, as recommended by the Senate Committee on Ways and Means. With that, I would stand for questions.
Committee, are there any questions for Dylan in regards to Senate Bill 155? Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dylan, can you tell me how much this increases spending over last year?
So, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, this is last year's bill.
Oh, this is last year's bill, not this year's bill. Thank you for the clarification.
Any further questions for Dylan? All right, seeing none, thank you, Dylan, for the update on Senate Bill 155. We'll move on to testimony in regards to Senate Bill 155, and I actually do not have anybody who is a proponent of Senate Bill 155. So if there's anybody, here's your chance to speak in favor of Senate Bill 155. I am also showing that there are no opponents to Senate Bill 155. So if you are an opponent to Senate Bill 155, now is your chance to speak to the committee. Not seeing any, and we do not have any neutral testimony as well. So if there's any neutral testimony in regards to Senate Bill 155, here is your chance. All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the hearing on Senate Bill 155. Next, we're going to have a presentation on the Build Kansas program, which happened to be in the budget bill last year, and we had extensive discussion on that in the Appropriations Committee. So I'd welcome Calvin Reed, the Secretary of the Kansas Department of Transportation, to give us an update on the Build program. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you for adjusting that. As well as the Infrastructure Hub or Build Kansas, a Build Kansas update. So, and make sure presentation is up as soon as it is up. So real quickly, I just want to thank everybody. Also just want to point out that we are a large agency. We have a lot of work going on right now. Obviously, the IKE program is a big part of what we do. I want to point to our mission real quickly. I don't want to talk a lot about it, but I want you guys to see that this is what we do. Obviously, we are very concerned about safety, reliability on our transportation systems, but we are serving Kansans. KDOT is an agency of about 2,200 employees, and we are located all over the state. We all know that the last couple of weeks we've been dealing with a lot of winter weather. I just want to publicly say I'm very proud of KDOT staff for going out and clearing roads in what were very extreme conditions, especially in the western part of our state. We've heard nothing but good reports out of our responsiveness and some really good stories about how we were able to deliver really above and beyond what we would normally do in snowstorms. So I just want to publicly thank all of our staff who are out there delivering for Kansans in those conditions like that. Now, the IKE Transportation Program is a 10-year transportation program that was passed in 2020. I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but just a reminder of what the program looks like. It's originally estimated at a $10 billion program. Over half of that is dedicated to preservation of our current transportation systems. About 25% of that is dedicated to modernization and expansion of our highways also. So just real quick, I don't want to belabor the point, but preservation is really about taking care of what we have. That was clearly identified as a legislative priority when Ike was passed, and that is something that we are delivering on. I will provide some information on that here in a few minutes. Modernization projects are projects that improve safety out on our roadways. So thinking about adding shoulders to existing 2 lanes, flattening curves, improving geometry. And then expansion projects are really about adding capacity. So converting a 2-lane to a 4-lane, adding passing lanes to a 2-lane highway. I'll talk a little bit more detail about some of the legislative targets and how we're delivering on those. But first, I want to, since this is appropriations, I do want to talk a little bit about the financials that we're seeing right now. Fiscal year 25, we're looking at about steady in terms of revenue compared to fiscal year 24. Sales tax is still about 1/3 of our overall revenue stream. We are seeing a flattening of our motor fuels tax, which has been expected. We have not seen any indications of a decline in motor fuels tax, although, with more and more adoption of fuel-efficient vehicles and alternative fuel vehicles, I would not be surprised to start seeing that towards the end of the program. Another thing that I want to point out from this slide, for the first year in several years, we will actually do some bonding in fiscal year 25. And really that was always anticipated as part of this program. We thought that maybe at one point with revenues, increasing revenues, we would be able to maybe forego some of the bonding. But just as revenues have gone up, expenses for our projects have also gone up. We've had some rapid inflation the last couple of years. So we are bringing bonding back to make sure that we can meet our cash flow obligations. When you look at expenditures for fiscal year 25, the main thing that I want you to see is that about 70% of what we are spending out of our budget is on construction projects. And the investments over the last 5 years, this is why 70% of our budget is construction projects. Fiscal year 23 was a very large year for us. In fact, a record year for us in terms of lettings. We are expecting a similar number for fiscal year 25. And when we look at that, that's really made up of several large projects that we are expected to let later this year. Those projects include the Polk Quincy Viaduct here in Topeka, the South Lawrence Trafficway over in Lawrence, a very large Kansas River Bridge project in Wyandotte County, and then the East Kellogg expansion down in Sedgwick County. Those are very large budget projects, and we will be letting them in fiscal year 25. Now, I talked a little bit about legislative targets. The statute that dictates the Ike program has several goals that the agency is supposed to meet. What I want to talk about today is how we are meeting those goals. So the first one we actually met in December of 2021, and that was to let at least one phase of each of the remaining T-Works projects, T-Works being our prior transportation program. So that has already been accomplished, and I will say we have even added onto it, recognizing that there were a couple of projects, a couple of phases of T-Works projects that were necessary to be delivered. So we have actually programmed for delivery of 2 additional projects up in northwest Kansas in Norton and Phillips County, about $50 million worth of modernization on K383 to complete that corridor. Now, preservation targets were not specifically set in the Ike legislation, but we know that preservation was a key priority of the legislature, and so we established targets for ourselves to make sure that we were tracking and making sure that our investments made sense. This details that we are on target to meet what we calculated as our minimum investments as part of the Ike program in preservation. And what that looks like is about $2 billion of projects that we have already let. Obviously, if you guys traveled around the state last summer, you probably saw a lot of cones. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of progress all across our state. And it's really taking care of some of the backlog of unmet needs that were left over from the T-Works program. We are starting to catch up, and now we are moving into what I would consider more of a steady state. So what that means is that we are continuing to program projects into our program for preservation. So these are our mill and overlay projects for us, bridge repairs, bridge replacements. In terms of modernization and expansion projects, there were some very clear guidelines set into the legislation that we were supposed to meet. I'm here to report that we are on target to meet all of our legislative requirements for our regions for modernization expansion projects. You can see the numbers on the screen. I want to point out there are a couple of districts up there that we do not currently have modernization expansion projects under construction. But by fiscal year 25, which is our mid-program, we had a goal of at least 40% of our end goal for each district to be let. We will meet those targets in those two districts. The two districts that I'm pointing at, or that I want to point out, are Northwest Kansas and North Central Kansas. So some key projects in Northwest Kansas include K23 modernization in Sheridan County, US 281 modernization in Osborne County, US 183 bypass, a new interchange or a modified interchange in Ellis County, and K25 in Thomas County. In North Central Kansas, we have 3 projects that we'll be letting in fiscal year 24 and 25 to meet the goals. They include K4 in Saline County. That's a modernization project near the southeast of Saline High School. I-70, K18 interchange. We're adding a flyover ramp at that interchange, high demand interchange, especially during certain weekends in the fall. And then K177 in Morris County. Didn't know if anybody got that joke there. Okay. All right, good. Got a few K-State fans in here, I'm assuming. So in terms of what that looks like across the state, these are the projects from a statewide perspective for our modernization and expansion. Over $2 billion of projects that we have committed, and about $700 million of that we have already under construction. And then just last fall, we announced another $350 million added to our construction pipeline. And then the last, we also have a mandated promise to spend at least $8 million or invest at least $8 million in each of the Kansas counties. We are on target for that. Right now, we have met that goal in 80 of our counties, so about 76% of the state. We have projects planned and scoped and committed for another 20 counties. So we have 5 counties left over that we just need to make sure we meet that commitment. We are so early in the program, though. We're only about 3.5 years in. We do not anticipate this being a problem at all. And then I want to talk a little bit about our local consult process. Local consult is also a part of the Ike legislation, in that every 2 years we're required to go out and meet with Kansans and discuss their priorities, understand their priorities, so we can help program those modernization expansion projects, making sure that we're delivering the highest priority projects statewide and regionally, but also to just get some feedback on how we are providing our services, what things can we do better. It's a real listening session. I would just like to thank anybody in this room that was able to attend any of our local consult sessions. I think they are very, very meaningful sessions for people, for policymakers to come and listen to Kansans. Not very many places where you can have several hundred of your constituents in one place and hear what their concerns are. What I will say is my biggest takeaway out of our local consult in 2023 was just the overall appreciation, no matter where we went across the state, that we were there to listen. We were not telling people what we were going to do. We were giving them options. We were listening to what their priorities were, and we're going to take that back and do some minor course corrects for our agency in the next couple years before we meet again in 2025. I also want to point out on this slide, almost $9 billion worth of modernization expansion projects that we took to local consult. Obviously, we don't have the capacity to deliver that in this program, so we will need to think about how we will commit to delivering those projects beyond the Ike transportation program. And then just real quick, I want to talk about some of our some of our local, our community programs and just talk about them, some of the successes. Cost Share is one of our most successful programs. It is always oversubscribed, and it's really about helping communities who have transportation challenges, but maybe just not the funding to be able to properly address them. So we work with communities. They send in their applications. We select projects, and really it's about us helping them get to the finish line. In the Transportation Committee hearings, I presented a couple examples of projects that have been delivered. So we are finally starting to see these projects that we would have initially selected 3-4 years ago. They are getting to the finish line right now. I look forward to presenting more information on how the Cost Share program and our other programs are really helping our Kansas communities thrive in future presentations. And as you can see on this slide, the nice thing about Cost Share, it is really, these awards are spread all across the state and a wide spectrum of awards. You have anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 awards all the way up to $1 million and $1.5 million awards. So this is a very flexible program that we can really tailor to meet the needs of our communities. Bridges are also a key concern of mine and really should be a key concern of our regions and our states. We know that Kansas has a large system of bridges, almost 25,000 bridges. 80% of those bridges are owned by our locals. And we just really have not invested in our locally owned system of bridges adequately for really the past 15 to 20 years. So we are playing catch up right now, and we are utilizing proceeds from the bipartisan infrastructure law, a specific program towards bridge improvements, where we can focus that money onto our locally owned system. As you can see on the slide, $43 million investment in our locally owned bridges in 2023. And obviously, we don't want to forget about our state-owned bridges, which are key to our transportation network. $130 million worth of bridge repairs and replacements also in fiscal year 2023. A lot of news recently about passenger rail and specifically the Heartland Flyer. I just wanted to provide a quick update to the committee on this. The Heartland Flyer, KDOT was able to secure a federal grant for a corridor ID program, $500,000 grant, which really will lead the way for planning for this eventual corridor. And understanding the long-term costs and then the cost to get this operational. So we will be working on this in conjunction with the Texas Department of Transportation and the Oklahoma Department of Transportation to really identify what the long-term needs for this corridor are and start planning for it. Best case scenario on this for the Heartland Flyer is we go through this process. We will need to obviously construct some solutions. We'll need to work with a Class 1 railroad. I think BNSF is the primary carrier in this corridor. And then eventually we would be able to have this operational. I think best case scenario is 2029 right now, what we're estimating to have this operational. And then aviation. This was brought to my attention last year when a bill was introduced to increase funding for aviation. I wanted to take a step back and make sure I completely understood what the needs and what the funding gaps were for aviation. I initiated a joint task force between our Kansas Airport Association and KDOT's Division of Aviation to really work together, collect data, understand what needs are out there in terms of preservation of our airports, particularly our runways, and then also what could we get by modernizing or expanding any of our systems. This information was compiled and was brought to us. We're going to have, there's going to be a bill introduced, if it hasn't already been introduced, to talk about raising the minimum funding for airports in Kansas. KDOT fully supports this bill and think it is necessary. And then real quick, this is my last slide regarding transportation. One of the biggest metrics that we have in our agency that really identifies success is our highway fatalities. I would just like to thank the folks at the Drive to Zero Coalition. Representative Francis is a member of that coalition. Just in really upgrading the conversation about highway safety. And I think we're starting to see fruit, right? For the second consecutive year, we have seen a drop in fatalities on our highways, pretty substantial increase this last year of about 7%. And for the first year in almost 10 years, we are under 400 fatalities on our highway system. Now, what I'll say is it's not all good news. There are some trends that are actually in the opposite direction. Work zone incidents, not necessarily fatalities, but work zone incidents have been on the increase. And then also incidents with what we call vulnerable users, which would be pedestrians, bicyclists, really just folks that are out using the transportation system. Those are also on the increase. So as we see the overall decrease in fatalities, we are really striving to understand why those other trends are going the other direction and what can we do to really help out with those trends. Now, I'm going to pivot, and I'm going to provide an update on the infrastructure hub and Build Kansas. I have a lot of information in here. I'm going to skip through a lot of it because a lot of this is really just background information. I think the specific request was to talk a little bit about our capacity extension team, so I want to focus most of my conversation on that.
Mr. Secretary, how about we just stop and see if there's any questions in regards to the Kansas Department of Transportation and the Ike plan, and then we'll move on to Build. Okay. Because I don't want to jump back and forth between the two programs and kind of get the questioning convoluted with the different programs.
At your direction.
So first, going back to slide 11, you had talked about the K18 project, and what was the location of that?
It's at I-70 and K18, that existing interchange there on the east of Junction City. We're going to be putting a flyover to help traffic coming from eastbound I-70 to northbound K18 right there.
Okay. I just kind of wanted to see what location that was. And then going back to slide number 4, on the parameters of the Ike program, you have the Special City County Highway Fund, which I know we had embedded that in Ike when we passed that in 2020. But I think there's also been a lot of local forms of government because we don't fund that in the budget bill, but it's funded in Ike.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted you to clarify that actually we do have the Special City County Highway Fund that is funded through the Ike Transportation Program.
Yeah, I might have to point to, So I'm getting a nod here. Yes, the Special City County Highway Fund is funded through Ike.
Because I need to check on the bill that is in tax right now, and I believe this is in that bill to fund the Special City County Highway Fund. So in essence, if that bill would pass, we would be double funding.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Brendan. Yep.
It doesn't surprise me that you said that, Representative Helgerson. The next question that I have in regards to the Heartland Flyer, so in the map that you have here, the light blue is already constructed railway.
Yes. Let me get to that slide and make sure I'm talking on the same page here. But yes, the light blue is corridors that currently exist. So the Heartland Flyer already exists from Fort Worth to Oklahoma City. This is an extension north to Newton that we're talking about.
Okay, so the project for the Heartland Flyer is between Newton and just a little bit north of Norman, Oklahoma.
Yeah, that is correct.
All right. And then going to the airports across the state of Kansas. So in regards to aviation, is this for upgrades to airports, or are we trying to lower fares? I'm specifically talking about Wichita. See if we can lower fares out of the Wichita airport, the Eisenhower Airport.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. Actually, the Eisenhower Airport is not funded. We do not provide any funding out of the state transportation system to the Eisenhower Airport. This is really to target I'll say, preservation of our runways at some of our smaller regional airports.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Representative Carlin.
Thank you. You touched on all the three things that I wanted to ask about, but I will clarify for my curiosity. Is there a design now for K18, or is that where are we on that? The I-70 K18, has that been designed?
That is currently under design right now, and just because we are about a year out from letting that project, we're probably acquiring right-of-way and moving into final design.
Okay, I'd love to see the design. Is there some way you can notify us when that's available for our input
Yeah, absolutely.
before it's finished.
Yep.
And also, if I might, where are we on target time-wise for the K-24 and Sethchild Road roundabout in Manhattan, which
Yeah.
apparently is...
Yeah, US 24, and yeah, is this the roundabout up by Tuttle Creek?
Well, there are two.
Yep, yep.
The one at Tuttle Creek on the Dam Road and 24 was supposed to be in design in January of 24. And I've been asked about the one where it's a little farther north, and it's a roundabout. It's after this one, I guess,
Yeah.
but...
We'll check on the status of those projects. I don't know specifically on those two. I am aware of those two roundabouts, but we'll check on the status and get back to
And
you.
I thank you very much for taking my request to, I think it was your predecessor, but to get the lanes corrected at the Dam
Yeah.
Road project. The community is very happy with that. In
Good.
fact, I'm wondering if we need a roundabout, but anyway, I'm not going to interfere with that. The federal money for the Heartland Flyer, is that the 500,000?
500,000, yeah.
That's federal money?
Yeah, that is a federal award through the Federal Railway Administration.
So we don't have to budget that?
We do not have to budget
All
that.
right, thank
That
you
is
so
correct.
much. Thank
Yep.
you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to go to the bridges.
Yep.
So is the 43 million and the 130 million, is that a formula? Or, I guess the reason I ask is I'm just kind of wondering, there's a lot more local bridges than there are state bridges. And I know, we have to pay the whole amount on the state bridges, but is there a formula that's the reason why we're spending more on the state bridges than the local bridges?
It's a good question. What I would say is we have, I can't say why we have made this decision in the past, but a lot of it has to do with home rule and being able, and counties actually being in charge of their own systems, that we have not traditionally had a lot of funding available for local bridges. We have had smaller pockets of money available for the last 10 to 15 years, but it's really been the last couple years that we have upped that number. I think there's an opportunity to increase that number, but the first thing we have to do is make sure that we can deliver even on this $43 million, because there's obviously challenges for counties to be able to deliver projects of this scale. We need to make sure that we can deliver on that before we overload or just at risk of overloading the system.
Yeah, because that's cost share for them, right?
Yeah.
Majority.
So, some of it is, some of it's not.
okay.
We actually have one program, our off-system bridge program is zero cost share for counties. And then the other program that we have, the local bridge improvement program, is a cost share. Does not necessarily require cash. There is actually an option for removing unnecessary poor condition bridges from the system also that can represent a portion of that cost share.
Okay, all right. Well, I was curious on that.
Yeah.
So you're looking into possibly increasing it, but you also want to make sure that you can.
Yeah, we need to
they
make
can-
sure we can deliver on what we've got right now.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thanks for being here. I guess I'm still the child of T-Works. You're talking in the heart of my district. I really kind of want a status update. I've heard reports that that's all the funding's been complete. I don't believe it has. We still have that third phase that we're trying to get some things finished up. Is that correct? Because that's kind of like the last thing of T-Works, I believe, that needs to get finished, and we can finally put that to bed. Is that correct?
So the projects that we had identified as modernization expansion projects coming from T-Works into Ike, we have delivered all of those projects, with the exception, we did not identify those two projects in Norton and Phillips County. When we deliver those two projects, that will be the completion of the T-Works program.
Because I believe when we passed Ike, T-Works had to be done before we moved on to, say, this side of the state, that because we've kind of been the forgotten ones to get that. And I know there's been some challenges.
Yeah.
And I know everybody become a cheerleader, one, to get me to quit talking about it, but to also have it done.
Yeah.
But, so, because there was a report that everything has been done, I know, and I don't believe that's correct. And, so, but I know we're still waiting for the last kind of things to get taken care of. Is that
Yeah.
still kind of where we are with that?
Yeah, for those two 383
Right, right.
projects. Yep, those are, we have committed to constructing those. So we have not established a date yet that I'm aware of, but we are committed to constructing those. So we have established money, and that money is actually outside of the Ike program. That is not part of our modernization expansion dollars. So this is separate money that we have set aside to finish those projects.
Very good. I know we'll still talk about it until they're completely done, but the two pages so far, great reports from folks. I've driven on them,
Yeah.
and the safety already in those two little small stretches is great. Mr. Chairman, a couple of the quick things. You mentioned the K-18 situation there in Gary County. I want to know, did KDOT learn anything? Because that's been an absolute mess forever till it finally got open, not only especially on game days,
Yeah.
but other times, and it just seemed like closing down the ramps, I don't know if that really solved things. A couple Saturdays we were on that and
Yeah.
trying to find the best way. Well, the alternative routes are much better, but did we learn? Because there's, and all that traffic going to Fort Riley, it seemed like on a daily basis even, it was a mess. And so I know weather was probably part of it, but did we learn anything on long projects like that if those happen
Yeah,
again?
I think you're talking about the I-70 improvements through Junction City, yeah. Yeah, we're constantly learning, right? Anytime that we have major work on an interstate, it is going to be impactful. I think we learned pretty quickly how impactful it is to have that highway shut down during weekends in the fall. And we took information from the folks out there, the kind of boots on the ground, and we worked with the contractor to obviously revise the situation out there. All reports that I have heard is that once we made those revisions, things moved a lot better. And so, right now we will continue to evaluate how traffic flows through our construction zones on I-70, because we will be doing that again this summer.
Mr. Chairman, you talk about, not necessarily to go about the bridges, but I wondered, as we look at some of these county bridges and things in the counties, can we have a discussion about, are there some that we can put the big tubes in? As far as from maintenance, because we're having struggles getting road and bridge crews in many of our counties. And then the time to, it's not even the dollar situation, it's almost a time. If you put a crew on to do a bridge, there's other things they can't get done. And are there, talking to some of my county commissioners, is there a possibility we could utilize some of this for tubes or work with your folks to really look at some of these roads and even county blacktops, if it would be a possibility to do tubes to save? Because I know we have bridges really on dirt roads. I mean, $1 million bridges on bridges really to nowhere. I mean, if you live on that road, I understand, but to me, that doesn't seem like a good investment.
No, that's an excellent question. And to my point earlier, our programs actually incentivize counties to do exactly what you're talking about. So if they want to replace a bridge, one way that they can provide a match, which is required for that program, is to do exactly what you're saying, is take another bridge off the system, maybe replace it with pipes, or take it off completely. And so those are options out there. Kansas is #1 in the nation in bridges per capita. That's not necessarily something to be proud of. So I think we need to be working together with our locals and trying to figure out how to bring that number down, that number of bridges that we have out there down. But we still need to make sure that we have the right system out there to deliver, obviously the agricultural products to the elevator, whatever. We need to make sure that it is right-sized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, and going back, when we were during the interim, we had the Legislative Budget Committee, and I received emails from constituents in regards to K-State game days, and that the Kansas Department of Transportation was trying to limit access to the city of Manhattan on game days, and I expressed that to you, and you had a response to that.
I'm going to go on the record and say I am a K-Stater. There's no way I would try to limit access to Manhattan on a football game day.
Representative Hoffman again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, I wanted to go back, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Highway 54. I should have mentioned it before. I know that you're putting in some longer passing lanes, but Highway 54 really does need to get onto a list that's higher than where it's been, I think. It's been talked about for probably 50 years or longer. And so, especially that from Prattish, Kingman to Liberal area, what are the plans, and is it being pushed up to higher? Because that is really, for that region, that is a major obstacle for them.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a lot of good points, and something that I've heard really since I've come back to KDOT 4 years ago. There's been a ongoing conversation about US 54 and what investments need to be made along that corridor. We heard lots of feedback at our local consult from both Southwest Kansas and South Central Kansas for the need of continued investment in 54. We will be coming out with more information here in the next month in our development pipeline announcement. And in that development pipeline announcement, we'll be addressing what happens, what comes out of that. But yes, we understand the continual need for investment on 54.
Okay, yeah, and I hope it's not just passing lanes. I mean, we really do need to continue that 4-lane all the way. So I appreciate that. We'll be talking more, I'm sure.
I'm sure we will.
Thank you, Mr.
Representative Francis.
I'm going to send the prior representative a Starbucks gift card after that eloquent statement of needs. So since that's already been done, I don't want to belabor the point. But one of the important things that I remember from the presentation that you had on the airports and house transportation was one of the focuses is air ambulance.
Yeah.
We have a lot of rural communities that are increasingly reliant on getting people to major hospitals. Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. As part of the Joint Task Force study, we had them not only look at pavement conditions, which is obviously very important. We want to make sure that we're preserving that vital transportation system also. But we wanted to look at opportunities. Where could we make some very strategic improvements in our system to help things like air ambulance service? So we identified really 2 to 3 airports that could serve for air ambulance to help improve access to air ambulance in our state, and that would really fill some gaps. I'm looking forward to our staff presenting. We're presenting to the Senate Transportation Committee some of the results of that joint task force. Obviously, we'd love to present to the House Transportation Committee also, just to help everybody understand the critical need for that service in the state and how we could really help make things better out there in rural Kansas.
Representative Francis.
And then the last thing, it's always been very important to me. I feel like we have an over-reliance on consultants to perform some of the basic functions that you guys need to be able to do. I understand there's a great need for consultants in the system. You can't be an expert on anything. But what are we doing to address the workforce issues at KDOT, both for the professional engineers and also for the guys that are out snow plowing and everything?
Yeah. So to your point, we do rely a lot on consultants. When we came into the Ike Transportation Program, our staffing was at a pretty low level. So we knew that in order to deliver this program, we were going to have to rely on consultants more than we had in the past. What I would say is sustainably, we would like to get it to a point, not that we want to shove consultants out of our business. We know they're extremely important to what we do, but we need to make sure that we are able to continue to sustain our expertise in-house, which means us being able to deliver projects also on our own. So we are in the middle of a process right now where we're looking at that. How can we make sure that we are continuing to deliver the program as people expect, but also growing internally to be able to meet the needs of future programs? And so that's where we're at right now. What I would say, one bit of good news, my second slide had to do with the number of employees that we have at KDOT right now. 2,200 employees. That's actually about 5% more than where we were at this time last year. So I would just like to thank you all for your continued support of state employees, public servants, in pay increases. They are meaningful, and I think has really shown a lot of benefit to our equipment operators. That's where we've seen the most growth. That's the folks that are out there plowing the roads. We've actually seen an increase in number of applications and number of people we've been able to hire in our maintenance workers, and so those are good trends. Obviously, we need to continue to support that so that we can continue to provide those services like we were able to provide when that major snowstorm came through the state a couple weeks ago.
What was the dollar amount that's in the development pipeline?
Right now, we
Right
have
now.
we have about we have $2 billion identified in our construction pipeline, and right now I think we're about $1 billion in our development pipeline. Don't hold me to that exact number. We can get that for you.
All right, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we'd like to know exactly the dollar amount. Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, Mr. Secretary. And I just want to say thank you, too, for your help this summer on addressing, I was on a mission to save the Central Avenue Bridge. And the good news is that a grant writer did reach out to me yesterday, and they are applying for federal funds for that bridge, which is really a critical access. It's the gateway to our city. And when the World Cup happens in a couple of years, I want to make sure that all those people in Missouri can make it over to KCK and spend their dollars. So anyway, thank you very much for that. I will also say I took a group of citizens with me to the consult meeting, and that was so beneficial for them, and then I think also for the conversation at the consult meeting.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My question is like totally on a different topic, and that is, I'm just curious as technology enters into more and more transportation, are you all focused or seeing like any threats or concerns in the cybersecurity area?
Yeah, what I would say is cybersecurity is just an ongoing concern. The message that has been sent to me is it's not if you get hit by a cybersecurity attack, it's when. So how do we prepare ourselves for that? In fact, the Washington Department of Transportation earlier last fall was hacked by some cybersecurity ransomware type folks. So we know the threat is out there. Just thankful we have a strong IT staff that is keeping us focused on cybersecurity. Obviously, that impacts how we do business. We need a lot more protocol in place. It does sometimes impact the speed of how we do business and our efficiency. But obviously, when one of those hits, efficiency is off to the side. We need to make sure people are protected and we can continue to provide services. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm not seeing any other questions in regards to specifically KDOT or to the Ike transportation plan. So if you want to go ahead and move into the build program.
Absolutely. Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, how much time will you allot me for this? I just want to make sure I'm staying on your schedule.
15 minutes.
15 minutes? Yep, we can do that. Okay, so back to the presentation, the Kansas Infrastructure Hub. These are the cabinet agencies that are represented by the Infrastructure Hub. The Department of Transportation has been identified as the lead agency, but really that's just an organizational structure, and we have the same voice at the table as any of these other agencies. What the Infrastructure Hub is really about is trying to find that sweet spot. We know that communities have needs. We know that there are state programs out there and state resources. We also know with the bipartisan infrastructure law and some of the other federal laws that have passed, there is a large amount of federal grant money that's out there that really can help our communities deliver on their visions. The Infrastructure Hub is there to help bring all those together and to help communities benefit from all of these different programs. The bipartisan infrastructure law is a 5-year program. We are in the 4th year right now. Is that right? I think that's right. 4th year of the program right now. It's a very large, comprehensive infrastructure program. I won't go into all the details. Just know that about 60% of the funding in the bipartisan infrastructure law is through discretionary grants. And that's grants that communities and agencies apply for and are competing against other communities and agencies all across the nation. Because there was an opportunity to really help communities overcome a couple of the key hurdles that were identified as part of all of these grants, and those 2 hurdles were, One, matching funds. Many of these grants have some match requirement. A lot of communities don't have the ability to put out that match, which is often 20 to 30% of a project. But two, technical assistance, just the ability to go out and understand the grants and apply for the grants. Those were the two big hurdles. So last year in the legislative session, the Build Kansas program was established, and the Build Kansas Fund is really a program that addresses those two key hurdles by setting aside $15 million through the infrastructure hub to be able to help communities find and apply for those federal grants, but then also $200 million set aside for communities to apply to be as part of their local contribution for a federal grant. This program really just got kicked off in July, and I'm going to give you a little bit of status update of what has been accomplished in the past few months. So just once again, one other thing that I would like to point out about the Build Kansas Fund is that there was a bit of a commitment to spread the finances across the state. So $10 million to each of our 8 identified economic development districts. So with any good program, there's a good process. And so a lot of our first few months was really working through a process that communities could understand, that the infrastructure hub and its agencies could understand, but also as part of Build Kansas, there is an advisory committee of legislators that are reviewing all of these applications. So they need to understand that also. And then finally, we are working with the state treasurer's office, who is ultimately responsible for distributing these funds. So they need to understand the process. So with all these people in the play, we developed a process. I'm not going to go through it in detail. Just understand that there is a process and we are working through it. And we're also flexible in that if something is not working in the process, we're willing to go back and look at it and evaluate it and try to make it better. As we discussed earlier about KDOT, we know that to deliver these, right now we don't have the staff expertise to do a lot of the boots on the ground discovery and coordination with all of the communities. So very early on, we identified that we were going to have to hire what we call an extension team for our staff. So a capacity extension team is what we call it. And really what their job is to go out and meet with communities and to help set up these processes and make sure these processes are being followed. The initial seed money for this was through Spark funds of $3 million. We needed to do that because knowing that the legislation was going to be passed or potentially passed and started up in July, we wanted to have as much groundwork done before that legislation became effective as possible. So we actually started this process back in March of 2023 with the idea of really getting ahead of the game instead of being behind it. And this is just a timeline of the activities of the capacity extension team. The main activities really for the first few months were to set up the processes and to do the initial communications with our communities, set up some websites for people to have transparency into what all is going on, and then coordination with the Build Kansas Committee and the State Treasurer's Office. Obviously, the ongoing tasks that we have right now are just continual meetings with community after community all across the state, and then also attending trade shows and other places where large contingents of our community members might be, and then we're continuing to do that. We've spoken to over 1,200 people all across the state, and really the CET advises on the best opportunities for our communities. Their job is not to say no or yes to any community, is not to advise them against, but to give them the information that they need to know how potentially successful and one of their applications could be to any of the BIL programs, and then ultimately to the Build Kansas program also. So it's really about resourcing our communities, not telling them yes or no. We've attended over 350 meetings across the state, 35 conferences, and then we've helped agencies also, KCC in particular, in identifying some potential opportunities to take advantage of the bipartisan infrastructure law and really help communities in addressing some of their long-term needs. We've been doing this all across the state. We actually have specific folks from our capacity extension team that are assigned to each of our districts, and they are meeting with these communities statewide on a nearly daily basis. So there is ongoing conversations and lots of information being gathered and lots of advice being given about how to apply for these bipartisan infrastructure law funds. And once again, this is not just transportation, it's not just water, it's really every sector that deals with infrastructure across the state. You can see that a vast majority of the requests have had to do with transportation. I think that's really about because those are the ones that are easiest to understand. When you look at some of the other infrastructure items, those are new programs that are getting stood up. If you ask the federal agencies, sometimes they don't even understand how those programs are being administered. So we really have been focusing on transportation and water because those are the two that are most mature. And then I've got some success stories. That's really for your guys' information. I'd be happy to talk about any one of them in detail. But there's really representation from across the state about how we've been able to utilize these funds and really how we've been able to bring the state of Kansas into the conversation and helping communities with any infrastructure need. So just a quick status update. We have awarded $11.7 million in applications for Build Kansas funds. And we have calculated that that will unlock potentially $88 million in federal funds. So that's a pretty good return on investment. Now, I'm going to throw the caveat in here that those federal grants have not been awarded yet. And I just want to be really clear on this point, right? We are not awarding this grant money to communities guaranteeing their success. That is really incumbent upon the federal agencies awarding their federal grant. What we are doing as Build Kansas is we are helping their probability of being successful. Okay, and I have good news. I found out yesterday that we had our first federal grant awarded as that was assisted by Build Kansas funds. So we are starting to see progress. I'm just going to say it's slower than what I expected. It's slower than what I want it to be. But we are starting to see progress. I think we'll see more and more progress as momentum gains and as communities see that we're able to really deliver on this. And then real quickly, some of the gaps. This is what a lot of our communications to communities is about. So we have over 400 programs that we're talking about in just the bipartisan infrastructure law. We also have a program called the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, that is a completely separate program that communities are inquiring about. But Build Kansas does not speak directly to the IRA. It speaks directly to the BIL. So there are numerous federal laws that we have to navigate and help communities navigate. But then just on the bipartisan infrastructure law, we have over 400 programs in all across different sectors. So just continual communication about what that means. One of the biggest issues that I think we continue to see is really just the maturity of a lot of the ideas that communities have. Obviously, for any of these projects to be successful, they need to be far enough down in the process that a federal agency would feel comfortable that that project is going to be successful. So, a lot of times that means you've got to do some preliminary engineering, preliminary design. I think communities have been reluctant to put out the effort, to put out the money that is needed to do that preliminary work. And I think that's going to hold us back a little bit in this process. What I'm seeing right now, and I've got firsthand experience of this, I've met with a couple of different communities, and they express their need, their vision, but their budget really just doesn't allow for spending $40,000 to hire a consultant and develop this on a bet that it will come. So I think there's an opportunity to have further conversation about what it looks like to support communities from that standpoint to get them ready to have projects at the table. But that's a bigger conversation. That is really not part of what our scope is right now for the infrastructure hub or Build Kansas. And then, like I said, I've got just some information at the end. Just for the sake of time, Mr. Chairman, that information is out there for the committee to review. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'd be happy to entertain any other questions that you have.
All right, so in the slides that we can look at later, the 6 applications that the advisory committee forwarded on to the federal government are listed in those particular slides. Can you disclose which one of those projects was awarded the federal dollars?
Yeah, I believe we can. Yeah, the city of Ozaki had some sewer improvements that they had recommended. I think it was through the BRIC Fund. I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly what BRIC stands for, but through the BRIC Fund, and yeah, that was the one that was awarded yesterday.
And then can you disclose how many applications we have pending that have not been forwarded on to the Build Advisory Committee?
I'm going to look at Vanessa Lamoureux to see if she can provide that number.
There are 3 that will go through the initial review this week and be forwarded.
Okay. So we've got 3 right now that are pending the infrastructure hub review that we would be prepared to bring to the committee in fairly short order. And then beyond that, we are obviously working with numerous communities. I don't have an exact number. 13 communities on other grant applications out there. I cannot disclose that right now because obviously there are some decisions that need to be made and some advisement that needs to happen with those communities.
And I think that outreach to our local communities, especially our small cities and communities across the state of Kansas, is critical in making this successful, because I know in my district there are still some that doesn't know this exists and is a possibility as far as getting some federal dollars for projects that, like you mentioned, they need to be done, but just the monetary cost, those smaller communities just cannot afford to have those projects completed. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Reed, I just want to reiterate that, and I've said this at every one of our meetings, and I hope that it's getting across. What's frustrated me is that I think almost every one of the projects of the 6 that we've seen had already submitted to the federal government before they came to us. And personally, I just, that really upset me. I voted for every one of them because they're good projects. And we also, it was the first 6 months, first year, so I kind of gave it a little bit of a pass, I felt like. But I hope going forward that that message gets out there that, in a way, they're circumventing the process that we put forward. And they really need to come through the process before they go, because I felt like that they just were like, okay, we found money for our match, but now all of a sudden the state has some money, so we're going to ask them to make that match. So, like I said, every one of them were good projects. They needed to be matched, but I hope that that message gets forward. And as we go forward, we don't see that anymore.
Yeah, Representative Hoffman, I appreciate that, and I agree with you, and we've heard that loud and clear. We are communicating that to our communities, and the 3 that we have right now, I believe, are all concurrent.
Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chair, did I understand correctly that we're in year 4 of 5 and have only granted 1? Oh, you misspoke. Okay, so I missed that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for the Secretary in regards to Build? All right, seeing none, you did that in pretty much 15 minutes.
All right,
Good
thank
job.
you, everyone.
All right, committee, we're going to have our first budget committee report outs. I will turn it over to Chairman Hoffman from the General Government Budget Committee, and I believe he is going to be starting with the Board of Barbering. I just conferred with Dylan. We should have our budget books in about 2 weeks. So you do have the budget printouts for all 3 budgets that we're going to be going through today, and then also the budget committee reports. They're on the colored pages. So, Chairman Hoffman.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the next 2.5 hours here, we can go through the Board of Barbering and the Board of Cosmetology. we're going to start with the Board of Barbering. The agency submitted an estimate of $228,000, all from the Board of Barbering Fee Fund. That was, and 1.9 FT positions in '24. That was an increase of $21,325 above the '24 approved amount. And those revisions included 12.5 or $12,500 in supplemental funding for the development application of electronic licensing platform. These funds are to cover unanticipated costs for the software development and application to comply with Senate Bill 66. Senate Bill 60, or that program is not ready yet to go forward, and last year we actually extended it out. So we're not going to fund that 12.5 or 12.5 million or 12,500. The revised estimate also included $5,000 in supplemental funding for computer-based testing increases in '24. They are seeing a lot of new people coming on wanting to test for barbering, and we did increase in the budget. There was a proviso that increased their fees a little bit for testing, but it still does not quite. They're still going to be a little bit short. So this $5,000 would come out of their fee fund to help them with those testing. Some of it's paid back through the fund or through the fees, but not all of it. And then there was also $3,500 in supplemental funding for costs associated with them traveling to a conference, and they haven't done much traveling since COVID, but now they're starting to get to go to these national conferences, and they're just attending, I think, 1 or 2 conferences. And then there was also they also asked for $325 for increase in their office rent, and their rent went from $12 or from $11.65 to $12 per square foot, and then their accelerator also increased a little bit. The governor recommended expenditures of $215,371, all from the fee fund and 1.9 FTEs. That was a decrease of $12,825. So the governor did not put in the $12,500, which our committee agreed with. She also did not put in the $325 for office rent increase. And so if you see our recommendations, we did go ahead and add the $325 out of their barbering fee fund for their increase in rent. And that's the only change that we made in '24.
Committee, any questions for Chairman Hoffman in regards to fiscal year 2024? All right, seeing none, maybe we'll move on to fiscal year 2025.
I'll move on to 25. 25 is almost exactly like 24. They had a revised estimate of $234,401, 1.9 FTEs, and above that's an increase of 31,997 above that'd be above the 24 approved amount, as well as an increase of $6,205 above the revised estimate for 24. And it's the same funding for the $12,500 for the electric licensing platform, the $5,000 for the computer-based testing, and $5,200 for travel, $325 for office, and then there was also the $8,972 for the legislative pay plan, which you will see in most of these budgets. That's just to fix the pay plan that we passed last year on some of these agencies. The governor recommended $221,576 from the fee fund, 1.9 FTEs. Again, the governor did not recommend the $325 for rent. She did recommend the $5,200 for the out-of-state travel, $8,972 for the legislative pay, and the $5,000 for the computer-based testing, but not the $12,500 for the licensing platform. The committee concurred with the governor, except for we added the $325 for their barbering fee, from the barbering fee fund for rent. So that's what we did.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Hoffman. So, committee, in regards to the pay plan, there was some adjustments that need to be made, and the State Finance Council voted on that, I believe, back in June for those adjustments. And so we actually took money out of the budgets for agencies and departments. And actually, and the intent was then to backfill that when the legislative session convened for the 2024 legislative session. We are going to be having a hearing on Thursday in regards to House Bill 2495, which is the correction of that. So, and Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, but if that bill would happen to pass the legislature so we can backfill what was done in the State Finance Council, we do not need to adhere to the $8,972 that they requested and also recommended by the governor. We would need to lapse that back to their fee fund because that would be corrected in House Bill 2495. No? Expenditure. It'd be fixed in that bill. Okay. So just keep that in mind. So it'd be the expenditure limitation that would be altered or changed in the bill. And then, so we'll keep that in mind when we're going through these budgets until that, if that bill passes, we'll have to make adjustments, possible adjustments when we're actually doing the budget bill. Any further questions in regards to fiscal year 2025? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Talk to me about this electronic licensing platform. I understand, certainly we want to go in that direction, and I understand in 24 it's not ready. Okay. 25 it's not ready either?
Chairman Hoffman.
Yeah, it's not ready yet, and it's not the Board of Barbering, it's the whole platform itself. If you remember rightly, that is, let's see, that's Senate Bill 66, I believe. And last year, I believe we delayed it, I think, until 26. I believe, if I'm remembering right. So it's being worked on, it's going forward, but this particular agency doesn't need to expend any money yet because the overall arching is not ready yet.
Perfect.
So
I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Any further questions in regards to fiscal year 2025? All right, seeing none, Chairman Hoffman.
I move the adoption of Board of Barbering budget for fiscal year 24 and 25.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Representative Turk. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Chairman Hoffman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will go to the Board of Tax Appeals. The agency requests a revised estimate of $2.7 million, including $1.1 million SGF in expenditures and 16 FTE positions in 24. This is an all funds increase of $458,753, or 20% above the agency's 2024 approved amount. The increase is primarily attributed to BOTA's IT modernization initiative, which was approved by the 2023 legislature. Due to the availability of federal the ARPA funds, these expenditures are reflected in the agency's budget submission in 24. The modernization initiative includes replacement, document management, and court systems, as well as upgrading a hearing room. The governor concurred with the agency's 2024 revised estimate. However, the government also recommended substituting $250,000 in expenditures from their fee fund with SGF in 24 because she's concerned about the revenue coming in on their fee fund. We looked at this, and initially here on our committee, we deleted that. If you see, it says delete 100,000, add 100,000. So we took that 250 to 150, and for 24, because we felt like that they didn't need the whole amount. After doing some looking at their fee fund, which they did not have with it, we did not have available at the time, Their lowest balance in '24, if we do not do the $250,000 sweep at all, or swap actually, is 500. Their lowest balance will be 530,000, which is enough. In '25, their lowest balance, which will be at the end of fiscal year '25, will be 296,000. So they are definitely going down. I do think it's something that we are going to have to look at, whether it be their fees are not their fees are not keeping up with their expenses. We do give some. If you look, there are we have right now a little over $1 million in SGF expenditures revenue to them. I do think it's something we're going to have to look at in the future. One of the reasons why their fees are not maybe keeping up is that we have exempted a lot of the filings. So if you file for your personal house, if you're filing on property tax for your personal house, it's exempt from a filing fee, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But some of those things are what's causing that. So I think we're going to have a deeper dive next year into whether or not we need to change those fees, add more SGF, or how we want to do that. My feeling is right now, though, we don't necessarily need to do that swap, even though we did that in '24.
All right, committee, any questions for fiscal year 2024? Representative Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were able to look at that, and the information we had at the time, we felt it was safe to give them a little bit in '24. After re-reviewing it today, I feel like the '24 adjustment's unnecessary, and I would make a motion to not adjust it in '24 and reassess in '25.
All right, committee, for the motion, is there a second? Second by Representative Sutton. Discussion on the motion. Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's why I seconded it. I think I probably agree with that, but I definitely want to discuss that just a little bit more. Now, the modernization expenses that we're talking about here, that's not going to be an ongoing expense. That's a one-time spend, right?
Chairman Hoffman.
Yes, and you'll see it in '24, '25, and then they told us in '26 it would not be there. Now, there may be a small maintenance fee, but that's will just be part of their budget that we see anyway, because they already have a maintenance fee. This was ARPA funds that they're using to do that modernization, and so we'll see it in '24 and '25, and then those funds will be extinguished, I guess.
All right. And so all of the funding for modernization is coming from ARPA?
Yes. Yeah.
And yet the fee fund balance is going down, and that's due to the fact that their
expenses are just not, their expenses haven't really gone up that much, but that fee fund is just not bringing in as much as it used to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But we can't get by 2 years with it?
I think so. We could. I mean, I know we can get by '24, no problem.
Gotcha.
And I was going to just make sure that I understood Representative Turk's. This would not sweep any, or not swap any, the 250 or anything. So there would be no swap at all in '24.
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, this sweep swap thing, you're starting to lose me here.
Well, what it did, the governor just basically said, we're going to put 250,000 more of SGF into their agency, and that means that they don't have to spend 250,000 out of their fund.
Right.
And we said, well, maybe 100,000. We'll do 100 or 150,000. But Representative Turks would just say, no, we're not going to do that switch at all. It's just all going to come out of their fee fund, which they have. They will still have 530,000 at the end of their fee fund in '24 if we don't do that, and they start with 735,000. So they're okay.
Representative Sutton.
All right. So We do have to revisit that, but we're on a track there's nothing, no emergency sirens going off or
No
anything.
emergency at this point.
Gotcha. All right, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question, though, that you said they were going to use ARPA funds for this. Okay, eventually that runs out. But you also said their fee fund was decreasing.
Chairman Hoffman.
Right, but those two things aren't really going together. The ARPA funds were, they were given ARPA funds to do modernization of their system, computer system. That doesn't have anything to do with their fee fund. So those, and that ARPA fund, they'll use those ARPA funds for their modernization, and then they'll go away. There won't be any more expenses for that modernization in
Okay.
26.
Representative Ballard.
I guess my question would be, you approved it, what has happened between you're approving it till now, apparently you wanted to give them one part of it, and now it's like, well, they don't need it at all. What was their presenting argument for why they wanted that additional money?
Chairman Hoffman.
Right, and I just want to reiterate, it has nothing to do with the ARPA funds. His amendment has nothing to do with ARPA funds. It's solely that they're operating, they right now operate on a split of some state general fund and some out of their fee fund. The governor suggested that more of it come out of state general fund than out of their fee fund. I do think it's a conversation we need to have in the future, but not for 24.
Okay, I'll have to respect that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion on the Turk amendment? All right, seeing none, Representative Turk, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just to sum this up. I'm a simple kid in high school. I got $1,000 left in my account. I'm spending too much, and I'm going to have $500 at the end of the month, and I'm going to Mom and I'm saying, hey, I need a boost in my allowance, Mom. Mom says, no, not this time. You don't need a boost yet. Okay, you still got lots of money in there. That's all this is. We'll readdress this in 25, and we'll be all right. So with that, I close.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion passes. Further discussion on fiscal year 2024. Seeing none, you may move on to fiscal year 2025.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The agency requests $2.2 million, including $1 million from SGF in expenditures and 16 FTE positions in 25. That's a all funds decrease of $454,612 from the estimate. This decrease is primarily attributed to the completion of the IT modernization initiative in 2024. So I'm sorry, I said it wrong to you, Representative Sutton. I almost called you secretary. I'm not sure why, but I almost did. They do finish that modernization program in 24, so that's why you see that decrease of those ARPA funds in 25, because that goes away. So they don't need that anymore. The governor concurred with the agency's 2025 request. However, she also submitted the $250,000 in expenditure swap that she did in 25. The Budget Committee did the same thing as in 24. We said, well, instead of 250, let's just do 150,000. So, and then we do need to look at that. If we do the 150,000, that will leave them with about 400 and some thousand in their fee fund at the end of 25, and they started with 506. So it's definitely going down, but they will be fine.
Any further discussion in regards to fiscal year 2025? I assume you're concluded.
I'm done.
With that. And it looks like Representative Sutton has some comments.
Well, no, I'm just confused on that last part. I thought the trajectory was a minus of 200,000 from 24 to 25, but now it's a 100,000 debit. Which one are we dealing with?
Chairman Hoffman.
I'm not sure you mean. What do you mean?
As far as the deficit to their fee fund, the reduction from one year to the next.
Chairman Hoffman.
Oh, okay. So the governor had said she would put 250,000 of SGF into their operating, which would be, so they would spend less than 200, or they'd spend 250,000 less in their fee fund. The budget committee said, no, let's do 150,000, which would save them 150,000 in their fee fund. So it's a $100,000 difference.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, with no swapping, just put that aside. If they're just operating off of their fee fund, what is the deficit per annum?
Okay, if we don't do the swap at all, they would have in June of '25, they would have or the end of the fiscal year of '25 in June, they would have 296,000 in their account. They would have started with 506,000 at the beginning of that fiscal year.
Perfect. That's what I was looking at. 200,000 is the deficit on approximately per
Yeah,
annum.
I guess it is about 200,000, yeah.
Okay.
And so what this does is gives them a little bit, it gives about 150 of that back, yeah. So they'll end with about 400, little over 400,000 in their account. There will definitely need to be some talk before '26, because if we go the trajectory, they will not have any money left in their fee fund, so.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to be clear, we adjusted last year a budget that was in a similar situation. And in this particular case, it just seems that the sources of their fees, in the legislature, we just kept cutting them off. There will have to be an adjustment. But at no point in the next 2 years will they reach zero. All right, so we would not risk that. But we are pinching pennies in this current time, and we're being as fiscally responsible as we can with this budget. So if there's any questions, we can fill that in offline. But we just got new numbers, and we're more comfortable with this today than we were when we initially heard. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion in regards to fiscal year 2025? Seeing none, Chairman Hoffman.
I would move the adoption of fiscal year 2024 and 2025 Board of Tax Appeals as amended.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion, seconded by Representative Turk. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion passes. Chairman Hoffman.
Okay, the Board of Cosmetology, the agency submits a revised estimate of $1.3 million, all from the Cosmetology Fee Fund, and expenditures in 14.5 FTE positions in '24. It's the same amount as the 2024 approved amount. Governor concurred, and the Budget Committee concurred. This one ought to be pretty easy. Any questions? It's all the same.
If you want, just go ahead and move on to fiscal year 2025.
All right. Agency submits a revised estimate of $1.3 million from the Cosmetology Fee Fund and 14.5 FTE positions for 2025. That's an increase of $277 from 2024, as well as an increase of $29,000 above the approved amount for 2023 legislature. The revised estimate includes the pay plan, basically, the $29,200 for the SB 25 pay plan. Now, this particular agency has had some issues in the past. They do have a new executive director. He's been on board for about 6 months. I do think, in talking to him, he's wanting to do some, kind of get the agency back in, back right, I guess. But the governor recommended expenditures of $1.4 million from the fee fund and 15.5 FT positions in 2025. That's an increase of $100,000 and 1 FT position above the agency's request. The recommendation includes $50,000 and 1 FT positions for an IT tech. The new position would facilitate the ongoing mitigation of the agency's licensing system and aid with purchase requests and other IT stuff. It also includes $50,000 for contractual audit services for 2025. The scope of the audit would include but not limit to agency statutes, rules and regulations, policies, and procedures. So the committee looked at this for quite a little while, and in finality, we deleted the $50,000 for the from the fee fund and the one to FTE to add an IT position in 25. We also deleted the $50,000 for the audit services, and we recommend that the agency audit be reviewed by a legislative post audit in 2025. We just felt like it's not a financial audit, it's more of a procedure, policy audit, and we felt like that legislative post audit would do a better job at doing that for far less cost than $50,000. I mean, they're paying it out of their fee fund, but still. That was our feeling, and I know there's some people on here that are on post audit. Maybe they have different feeling, but that was kind of our feeling that the post audit could do this agency. We also, in talking to the director, so this agency is one of them that did not go in with the licensing software that OITS is providing, which I feel is a mistake, and the new executive director feels like is a mistake. They are spending upwards of $100,000 a year on maintenance of this new system that is not working for them, where they could go, so they could go into OITS's new licensing for around $350,000, and then would be about a $45,000 a year maintenance fee. So that's the reason why we did not do the one FTE, because OITS can, I've had multiple discussions with OITS, they can provide the service that they're wanting this one position to do. The current executive director is looking into the possibility of getting out of that agreement that was made, because basically the vendor that they're using is not delivering. And so they feel like they can get out of it for non-delivery. So that's the reason why we put in this last is the Budget Committee encourages the agency to collaborate with OITS for the purpose of developing a new licensing database. I'm actually going to, once we get through all our other agencies, we're going to revisit the cosmetology and try to help them with this migration. They need the $350,000 if they're going to migrate, but I'm not sure they're going to be ready to migrate in 25. So we're going to have some more discussion, but that's where we are with this agency at this point.
All right, thank you, Chairman Hoffman. Discussion on fiscal year 2025. Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Chairman Hoffman. So it sounds like the Board of Cosmetology stuck in a contract that they don't particularly like. Does that contract, I mean, is it possibly null and void if the Board of Cosmetology doesn't exist any longer?
Chairman Hoffman.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm sure that's a possibility. Yeah, that it would be null and void if they don't exist anymore. I do think that they have grounds. Their legal staff is working on. I do think they have grounds to get out of the contract, and I'm not totally sure that the vendor that they are with doesn't want to get out of it too, because they're just, I think they maybe bit off more than they can chew, this particular vendor, and they're just not delivering what they had promised. So I think that, and I know where you're going, I don't think we want to open up that can of worms to merge.
Representative Owens.
But Mr. Chairman, I think the board of hair follicle reduction might be a great place for both of these organizations to reside in a combined united front.
I thought it was going to be hair follicle removal.
Oh, sorry. I went with reduction because if we removed you wouldn't have any hair.
Oh, okay.
So just reducing.
Are you creating a new agency?
By eliminating two others, possibly? I'll reserve that right until we learn about this contract more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion on fiscal year 2025? All right, seeing none, Chairman Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move the adoption of fiscal year 2024 and 2025 budget for the Board of Cosmetology.
All right, committee, you've heard the motion by Chairman Hoffman, seconded by Representative Turk. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. Okay, committee, that actually concludes all of the major items today on the agenda. You should have also received a report that was distributed to the committee on January 19th, 2024 for the Emergency Medical Services Board. So tomorrow, or until tomorrow at 9 a.m., we are adjourned.